Welcome, Sister Mary Sujita. While I've mastered our postulant Dave Diradorian's last name, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce your last name, Sister. It will save both of us embarrassment, and more importantly, it will give you more time to share your wisdom with us. Most of us already encountered you after our 2007 General Chapter, when your address to the chapter delegates was circulated throughout the region as part of Being Brothers Today. We read, studied, and discussed your challenging words to us. Thank you for that. You know religious life well, having served for 12 years as the former Superior General of your congregation, the Sisters of Notre Dame. You have much in common with us brothers. You have served as a teacher, a social worker, a social service coordinator, as a missionary, as a spiritual director, and you have served with the poorest of the poor in your native India. You have been an internationally recognized advocate for literacy and the empowerment of women. This morning, when I was at the breakfast table sitting beside Brother Alvaro and asked him to share a bit about you, he shared that you had been part of a council of 16 of Superior Generals while you were Superior General. And at one point, addressing a group of cardinals, I presume, you spoke up, and I know the brothers will appreciate this after a discussion yesterday on the role of women in the church, which did not please the cardinal, and apparently he let you know that. So it's good to know it's not only the American sisters that occasionally ruffle feathers in the Vatican. We are so glad that you are with us here today to talk about spirituality, and specifically about rediscovering and celebrating the vitality of our life in the Spirit. Welcome, Sister Sujita.
My dear brothers, I feel privileged and happy to be back with you. Before I say anything else, I must say that I carry in my heart tremendous respect, appreciation, and affection for this congregation and for you brothers. So even what I say here, maybe a few times I may raise questions, but I want you to know that it is with deep appreciation for who you are and what you have been doing that I say these things, because I believe God is always calling us to the more. Even when we are doing extremely well, there is still the more. So why I make it very clear is that during my talk, I am not saying about all the wonderful work you are doing. That I know in my heart. I appreciate that. From all that I have read about your congregation, especially the very inspiring pastoral letters of your Superior General, Brother Alvaro, it is very evident that during these past several years, there has been an ongoing common search for a deeper spirituality throughout your congregation. In fact, after reading some of the letters of Brother Alvaro, I thought, no, I am not going for this conference. He has said everything one can say about prayer. I see, brothers, that there is a persistent call among you to be a holy and transformative presence of Christ, whose passion for Jesus and compassion for God's people will continue to make a difference in our wounded world. I remember the strong emphasis of your last general chapter regarding the urgent need for a deeper spirituality and interior life, even as you cope with the escalating demands of your ministry as Christian educators. You continue to ask some very difficult but pertinent questions regarding the meaning and purpose of your call to consecrated life as brothers. My reflections on spirituality for our time are in the context of this ongoing spiritual journey that marks your life and mission today. I'm afraid that not being a theologian or a spiritual writer, I have nothing spectacular or new to offer you. Nevertheless, as close disciples of Jesus, you and I continue to experience the fire and passion of Jesus in our lives, and there is joy in sharing this. Is it not true that each time we speak of Jesus, ponder him and his mission, and share about his passionate involvement with us and our world that God so loves, the inner fire of our call is reignited. So with this spirit we share. Today among us as ministerial women and men religious, there is much talk about our call to be mystics and prophets, about our absolute need to be people of spiritual depth and interiority. Yes, we exist for God alone. God is the absolute in our lives. We have only one aim, one mission, the mission of Jesus. We come to the heart realization that this sublime call during moments of intense contemplation and intimacy with our Trinitarian God. Out of such an intimacy, the eyes of our hearts will be open to see and love God's people from God's perspective. This was the secret of the life and mission of Jesus. As one goes through the life and writings of your saintly founder, there is absolutely no doubt that he was captured by such an intimacy with God and a passion for God's people, especially the youth. I must admit that I got so interested in your founder's life that I keep looking for things written about him and what he has written. Very relevant for our time today. As disciples and brothers of Jesus, you are called not only to teach about God, but to become the very presence of a compassionate and forgiving God, for whom every person, especially the most needy, is precious. In this context, how very urgent and relevant is your presence and mission in our world today, especially your presence among the youth. And so we pray, Jesus, teach us to pray, that we become this beautiful presence in our world. Jesus is our teacher par excellence in the school of divine intimacy and prophecy. The gospel tells us that as the news about Jesus spread, more and more crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. The gospel also tells us that Jesus often withdrew to a lonely place and prayed. He kept his priorities very straight. The great demands made on him to be a healer, a leader, a provider of food for the hungry did not diminish his thirst for intimate moments with his Abba or take him away from his time alone with his beloved Abba. Very clearly, it is in his moments with his Abba that Jesus found the answers, found the energy to reach out to the poor and needy in compassionate love. He prayed the whole night before he chose the apostles. Did he not know his Father's will in this regard without losing a whole night's sleep? No. He too needed to wait in silence before his Father, to listen to the Spirit and to see the alternatives available to him before he chose his disciples, decided what he would say, to whom, when, and why. This being intimately united with his Abba was absolutely essential for doing his mission. All that Jesus said, did, his very presence tells us that he was not the glorified CEO of his Father, who came to manage and administer God's world that was lacking in efficiency and success. No, the mission of Jesus was to lead all to his Father, to reconcile and to heal, to bring hope, to comfort the afflicted, and also to discomfort those who were overly comfortable, to turn things upside down, inside out, and to rediscover the identity of God's people and lead them back to God. It's very difficult to reflect on Jesus and to be too comfortable. And so, dear brothers, we all know that the need of the hour is a vibrant and healthy spirituality. Sorry. Speaking of the need for a vibrant spirituality in religious life, John Chittister says, "It is the function of religious life to give a lived demonstration of union with God, of seeing the world as God sees the world, of coming to growth both through failure and through success. In the final analysis, it may be the finest gift we have to give. But those who do not pray cannot teach it, and without it the world is poor indeed. Without it the poor will not be sustained, and the rich will not be converted. Without it, we ourselves will be the weaker witnesses." The challenge before us as religious is one of deeper spirituality and interiority. Christian spirituality is absolute with the following of Jesus, living out the values of the kingdom of God and generating a community transformed by the love of God and others. The goal of Christian spirituality is to foster justice, to make right our relationship with God, ourselves, others, and Mother Earth. Fourfold relationship is the fundamental aspect of spirituality. So what are the non-negotiables of a healthy spirituality? In Ronald Rolheiser's beautiful book, Holy Longing, he spells out 4 non-negotiables, and I think they are wonderful. First is private prayer and private morality. Private prayer and personal moral integrity in things, even in the smallest private affairs, are things that Jesus makes non-negotiable with the spiritual life. The quality of our witness depends much on this. So private prayer and private morality. Another aspect is social justice. Jesus' teaching on this is very consistent and strong throughout the Gospels and leaves no room for equivocation. Where we stand with God depends not upon just prayer and sincerity of heart, but also on where we stand with the poor. Justice is a non-negotiable pillar of our spirituality and mysticism. And the third pillar, mellowness of the heart and spirit. Sanctity has to do with gratitude. In the Gospels, the call to have a mellow, grateful heart is just as non-negotiable as are the demands to keep the commandments and to practice social justice. Mellowness comes from a reconciled life and an ongoing experience of conversion. And the fourth pillar, community. Community is a constituent element of true worship. Jesus teaches us clearly that God calls us not just as individuals but as a community. How we relate to each other is part of how we relate to God, which also determines our relationship with material goods and Mother Earth. And I was always impressed when I read your documents, the beautiful emphasis on community. So also, let's ask ourselves, with all this, what we have received and we continue to receive in our life and mission, does our life in the Spirit empower us to cast fire on earth? Why is it that our presence and ministries often have so little impact on the lasting transformation of our people? Definitely, lot is happening, many things are changing. Nevertheless, the present reality within the church make us question many things. It is the way we live and minister in the realities of our world that make our mystical union with God prophetic, coherent, and credible. Often, our prayer life does not impact our way of being and doing. Teilhard de Chardin understands well this human condition when he says, "When I come down from the mountain, and in spite of the glorious vision I still retain, I find that I am so little better a person, so little at peace, so incapable of expressing in my actions and thus adequately communicating to others the wonderful unity that I feel encompassing me. Perhaps our faith is too shallow and not founded on our deep union with God of Jesus." Isn't that true? We can spend hours in prayer and come down out from the chapel, and the first thing we do could be a negative reaction to somebody. This is of so much love for God, and come out, but this brother, I have a problem. So this is what we are talking about, the unity of the two. The gospel tells us that Jesus was filled with the Spirit of God, and that when he spoke with authority. When he reached out to those in need, power went out of him. Jesus reminds us that out of the heart, the mouth speaks. But most of us speak out of our minds and out of our ideologies. The question is then, what is in my heart? What is in my heart? If we are people of integrity, if we practice what we preach and profess, the truth of our consecrated life will become clear to those who meet us, and they will know who we are and why we are. Not only know us as Professor so-and-so, or so teacher, or as social workers, or as good communicators. They will know us as men and women of God. When we speak after having pondered the Word of God within our hearts, when we speak out of our genuine, deep God experience, when we speak as persons of integrity who are touched by the divine, then we speak with authority as Jesus did. And our world so much needs this presence of people with authority as Jesus did. When Jesus enters our lives, our response will be same as that of Mary of the visitation and Mary Magdalene after her encounter with Jesus at the tomb. They were indeed on fire with the presence of Jesus. To be in mission, we must be men and women of holiness, compassion and reconciliation. Both East and West spiritual masters teach us that we become what we meditate. I think that's a profound truth from both traditions. We become what we meditate. There is a story told of Buddha. Buddha was very overweight because for long hours he used to sit under the trees praying for enlightenment. He didn't have all the exercises you have these days. One day, a trim, handsome soldier came along, looked at Buddha and said, "You look like a pig." And Buddha replied, "Well, you look like a god." "Why did you say that?" asked the rather surprised soldier. "Well," replied Buddha, "we see what is inside of us. I think about God all day, and so when I look out, what I see is God. You obviously must think about other things." Yeah. What a beautiful lesson for us in the mission of communicating God. Maybe today we could spend some time thinking about where is our heart, where is our thought. Your holy founder reminds you that you must see Christ in all your students. This way of seeing God presupposes, as God says, presupposes that we are friends of God, that we have a healthy relationship with God. You could just pause for a moment. What is that relationship I have with my God? I don't want to put you to sleep, so I better ask you some question. What aspect of your spirituality gives you joy and enthusiasm at this time in your life? You can turn to your right or left and just share something in your spirituality that gives you hope, joy, enthusiasm. Just share a little bit with the person next to you or behind you or around. Definitely you are here because it does give you joy and hope and enthusiasm. So please enjoy sharing. Okay, brothers, we continue. But I am sure sometimes we find it very challenging to share something like this. We think it is between me and my God. Why should I say this to other people? It may be very interesting to share what really gives us joy in our relationship with God. Our Indian spiritual tradition speaks of inward sight, meaning the inner or the third eye, which, like the gift of faith, enables us to see things as God sees them and feel about things as God feels about them. Inward sight can also mean a gaze that is inward, turned towards the heart, the core of our being. Jesus tells us, where your treasure is, there is your heart. The gift of interiority perhaps is the greatest gift that we consecrated men and women can offer to our present world as it searches for spirituality and meaning. Our challenge is to discover the divine within us, to live the profound mystery that we are the living temple of the Holy Spirit. Such a disposition will open us to the secret of seeing the divine within and without. Passion for Christ and His mission comes out of this vision of ourselves, of others, and of the world. Like Buddha, when we look out, what we see is touched by the divine. That changes all our relationship. Even the hardest person to get along, if you meet the person, but the touch of the divine is there, we know what to say, how to act, and what not to say. But how do we develop this divine, sense of the divine, this sacred presence, as we live in a socio-cultural and economic milieu that is saturated with constant noise of the modern communication, the modern development? In our present culture, we have become a people so scattered that one finds it almost impossible to be fully present to one thing or one person at a time. I was watching somebody, I was in Berkeley for some time, I was watching a person doing 3-4 things at the same time. He was on the cell phone, he was eating a sandwich, the television was on, and he was responding to a person who wanted an answer. 4 things at the same time. Then you wonder, what is he paying attention to? So this is our modern world. The absence of the silence, the absence of interiority and focus and fruitful solitude and the growing spirit of individualism and isolation are the byproducts of our global culture. We cannot cultivate genuine inner life and interiority, a sense of the divine, without the necessary discipline, solitude, silence, and contemplation. Professionalism and a comfortable and secure middle-class lifestyle can leave our people untouched by our life because they do not experience us as people of God, living a holy and integrated life, creatively present and involved in the joys and agonies of the world. You and I can think of people whom we have met in our lives, brothers, priests, sisters, whose very presence made us feel that we were in the presence of God. But many others we can remember as good teachers, professors, social workers. But somehow we don't associate the divine with them. Yes, we are faced with the great challenge of this combination of being and doing, and more being than doing. Religious life, in all its strengths and weaknesses, has always held out the vision and the hope of being more, and not just doing more and having more. So really our motto is to be more, to have less, but oftentimes we go the other way around. Karl Rahner's famous words, "The Christian of the future will be a mystic or not exist at all." This saying continue to challenge every baptized Christian in a particular way, and in a very particular way every consecrated person in the church. I must apologize, I have a problem with my eyes which developed just recently. I have problem reading. So if I fumble a little bit, forgive me, I really have a little difficulty. As we face the fast changing realities of our globalized and increasingly secular world, if we are serious about Jesus and his mission, we will sense the urgency of being people of deep spirituality and mysticism who want to create a true God sense in our world. Is there a God sense in our schools, in our colleges and universities, in our communities? A sense of God. Contemplation, the experts tells us, is not just looking at God, but also looking at the world with the eyes of God, with a sense of God. It is not enough to see God in the other, but also to see the other as God sees him or her. I remember my experiences of absolute helplessness while accompanying young women who had been sold and resold again and again in human trafficking. Women who had been violated beyond our wildest imagination. How can one really enter this world of suffering and brokenness with a sense of God? What is the sense of God that I will bring to those places? Those were the moments when I personally began to hear Jesus' persistent call to be his healing presence beyond all the plans and programs and great schemes I have. Be there as my presence. Our practical mysticism of being places a fourfold relationship at the center of our lives. Our relationship and at-homeness with our own self, with one another, with our God, and with all of God's creation. This is also a spirituality of vulnerable presence that empowers us to recognize the divine in ourselves and in others. I think our world has lost the sense of the divine. I hear that, for example, here in the States, you are not even saying Happy Christmas anymore. It's Happy Holidays. Almost a desire to get away from anything of God. And this is not only here, these things are coming all over the world. Little God allergy, you know. This is your private affair, keep it to yourself. Chichester says, even our prayer commitment can become formality and routine, thus preventing us from entering into the experience of the mystery, the authentic mystical dimension which leads to the transformation needed for a prophetic response in our world. So how do we become prophets and mystics without this divine sense in our own hearts? We put a lot of energy and time into our routine, discursive prayer practices and rituals, which can help us and give us the false satisfaction of being deeply spiritual persons. Maybe this is more with the nuns. We pray a lot in the chapel, say all our prayers, singing everything. But that is there, and this is now here. It's the change. Whilst these prayers are important, it's essential to our growth in spirituality that we set aside quality time for silence and solitude so that we learn to listen to the silent communication of God and become rooted in His divine presence. Silence is not just the absence of speaking. In the tradition of Hindu holy men and women, silence is fixing the mind on the one thing necessary. Silence is fixing the mind on the one thing necessary, one person necessary. We need to learn to sit still and enter the cave of our own hearts and find God within before we can find Him outside. As we need a steady diet of self-discipline and asceticism to nurture the gift of solitude and divine intimacy, and to remain faithful to this inner call. I keep coming back to that because until and unless we have that relationship, that friendship with the divine, I feel it's impossible to touch our ministries, our people, with this presence of the Holy. It cannot come from somewhere else. A quote from Thomas Merton is very appropriate here. Let me seek then the gift of silence, where everything I touch is turned into prayer. It's beautiful. Everything I touch is turned into prayer. Silence and solitude were very important parts of the life of Jesus. The balance that we see in the inner life and ministry of Jesus challenges us to create the same balance in our life and ministry. When we yield to the temptation of our busyness and replace our need for silence and sufficient contemplative God moments with work and more work, inevitably we lose our balance and our first enchantment with religious life, and consequently meaninglessness creeps into our consecrated life. I am sure Brother Alvaro can agree with me also. In my 12 years as Superior General, whenever our sister asked to leave the convent, almost 99% of the time we could trace it to lack of fidelity to prayer life. Let it go, and then the community life goes, then many things go. So definitely this very disciplined, purposeful relationship with God and times of prayer, times of solitude is absolutely fundamental if religious life is to have a future. So just a moment, ask yourself. I can ask the same question to myself. When we have a very busy day, we've been working so busy, what is the first thing that you let go? The day has been very busy ever since you got up. What is it that you will let go? No answer asked. I think most of us will end up saying this. What we let go may be the same. I invite you to recall a spiritual experience in your life when you felt deeply at home with God and with yourself and felt so free in your heart. Just look back for a moment. It may have been a momentary experience, but you felt so held by God, so one in a friendship and an inner freedom that just gave you all that your heart would desire. One time, many times you may have experienced, just recall for a moment one experience of a deep, intimate, freeing moment with God. Are you tired? Do you need a stand-up break? Are you okay? You are listening. I always tell people, I come from India, in northern India, where we speak Hindi. So I always tell them, I hope you understand my Hinglish. Yeah? I hope, are you okay? All right. When we speak about the need for fidelity to prayer, I have heard the expression from some religious, don't worry about me, sister, God understands me. Or, my work is my prayer. Such an attitude will eventually lead us to meaninglessness and irrelevancy in our religious life. The attitude that my work is my prayer comes from the wrong understanding of spirituality. We need quality time in solitude and prayer if we are to learn how to make our work a prayer experience. Some of us are trying to reduce our prayer times in the name of apostolic involvement. Maybe brothers don't do that. See, I can only speak for sisters. However, in the name of our need for relaxation, we can easily find plenty of time to watch our favorite TV programs, sports, and some of these programs may even be empty of any life-giving values. We are well motivated by our fast-changing world regarding what can relax us, what can make us feel fulfilled, and how we can nurture our individuality. We are very clear about all this, all of us, men, women, religious, no problem. And we need it. But the question is, do we have the same concern about nurturing our relationship with God? So we are balanced people. The work we do can be done by many others. I am sure you are also discovering that. Even in India, our wonderful schools, now we are seeing more and more Hindus and other groups are coming up with excellent schools. They have learned a lot from Christians as well. So slowly it looks like our institutions with quality people are able to run. But the mystical and the prophetic presence that we religious are called to be in our society is our specific gift to our needy world, to be Christ to our world, to be God's presence to our world. Sandra Schneider says in her book, latest book, prophetic action is the public face of mysticism. I like that because mystics do not mean we go to the caves and live somewhere. Mystics become prophets of today. The prophet has to be a mystic. The fruit of a vibrant spirituality are made visible in prophetic audacity in carrying out the mission of Jesus with inner freedom, detachment, and a joyful availability. The story of a Zen Tibetan monk summarizes the true meaning of spiritual freedom and detachment. As the Chinese army invaded Tibet, all the monks fled from their villages for fear of being tortured by the invaders. In one village, however, one monk refused to move. When the Chinese commander came to know of his presence there, he marched into their monastery, kicked open the gate, and confronted the monk, saying, "Do you know who I am? I am he who can run you through with a sword without batting an eyelash." The monk replied quietly, "And do you know who I am? I am he who can let you run me through with a sword without batting an eyelash." This is the quality of men and women who are God-realized persons. This is what spirituality and mysticism will make us, strongly grounded in the divine. So we can live without batting an eyelash when everything seems to collapse, including perhaps certain aspects of the church. We cannot reflect on spirituality. Also, another aspect is, I want to just enter into one more aspect of spirituality which is very essential, and I see that very true to your spirituality and ours. That is the Eucharist. Our journey as consecrated men and women in the mission of Jesus is Eucharistic in the real sense of the word. Eucharist transforms us, strengthens and empowers us for ongoing participation in God's mission. Eucharist is the feast of God's desires for us. It is a feast of relationship and communion. Pope Benedict in Spe Salvi reminds us, being in communion with Jesus Christ draws us into being for all. It makes it our own way of being. He commits us to live for others, but only through communion with Him does it become possibly true to be there for others, for the whole. A beautiful statement made about Eucharist. How do we become men and women of the Eucharist? And I think we can learn it from the poor. So I am going to share with you a very deep personal experience I had of the Eucharist while I lived with the poor. I lived many years with the destitute people in Bihar who are called Musahars or the rat eaters. They are the lowest in the entire Indian society's so-called untouchables, ex-untouchables. There's nobody below them. They lived in little mud huts, and for many years, their little mud hut was my home with other two sisters. I called them Baba, meaning father, Maya, mother. So I lived with a couple, an old couple, father and mother, and they called me Betty, daughter. They were landless, jobless, and assetless. Absolutely nothing. They lived in the little periphery there in a little mud hut. During the harvest season, they would go out early in the morning to the rice fields of the rich with a broom and basket and would spend their whole day sweeping up the gleanings left behind by the harvesters. In the evening, they would return with the grain they had gathered. Meanwhile, I would be busy with some literacy classes for the children who never went to school, women who were illiterate. As soon as my Baba and Maya returned to the village, they would get busy separating the grain from the mud because they swept up everything, and then dehusking the rice and cooking. Hunger and fatigue used to be written all over them as they had not yet had their first meal. It's usually around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening. Within minutes, I could smell the aroma of rice being cooked. And then I would see Maya, this old lady, getting into my hut, picking up a little aluminum glass and the sari. This is a sari, you know, filthy. She takes it and wipes the glass with it. And you know, I used to cringe at the sight in the beginning, but later I began to see better, you know. And then she would go to this cooking rice, fill it to the brim, and bring it to me, I who had some breakfast and some lunch already. With a twinkle of joy in her eyes, she would say, Betty, Pio, daughter, take and eat. Take and drink. One day, those words hit me like a bolt from heaven. Maya's words of love instantly drew my heart to the words of Jesus at the Last Supper, when He became our bread of life and asked us to take and eat. I accepted Maya's gift of rice, and holding the hot glass of rice in my hands, I went inside the hut. I can still remember, I was alone that day. It was little cold time, so we had straw on the mud floor. I sat in a corner with that glass. It was very hot, holding it with my sari. I sat there for a long time. It hit me. Betty, take and eat. Daughter, take and eat. I was trying to comprehend this beautiful experience of the Eucharist. Yes, this simple act of love had deeply touched me, and this experience instantly led me to the heart of the Eucharist. God used this so-called untouchable, illiterate Hindu woman who knew nothing about Jesus or the Eucharist to open my heart to the astounding mystery of the Eucharist through her act of self-emptying love. She was indeed instrumental in helping me see my prophetic call to be Eucharist to my people as she shared the bread. Here is the rice blessed by her poverty, the rice broken by her struggle to survive, the rice shared unconditionally in love. She never worried whether I had my breakfast and my meal or she had nothing. Love was totally unconditional. It was not a pious ritual. It was love in action, love that had a big cost because she was really hungry. Maya's simple act of offering me the hard-earned rice taught me many lessons of life. She taught me that the Eucharist is sharing and blessedness. It is giving thanks because she shared her little rice, giving thanks for my presence with them. That was her way of saying thank you for being here. The spirituality of Eucharist is one of deep gratitude that impels us to cross borders and to share even when it hurts. Brokenness is integral to being Eucharist. Brokenness is part of being Eucharist. Maya taught me the meaning of breaking our lives that others may live. Really, brothers, I cannot explain the destitution and poverty these people lived in. That's why this act becomes so very deeply meaningful. Her generous love was a silent invitation for me to break the bread of my life, break out of my selfishness and my securities, my plans, all that I held because I was more educated, I was more privileged. She taught me that Eucharist as a spirituality is entering fully into the mystery of communion and community and sharing in the joys and agonies of my people. It's very interesting how God uses this kind of people whom you think are illiterate, they know nothing. They become the wisdom of God for us. In persons like Maya, Jesus unfolds for us his own vision of the Eucharist, which we are now invited to live in memory for the transformation, in his memory for the transformation of the world. A Eucharistic spirituality will always have a tremendous impact when we are ministering to the children and adults, poor or rich. Because at the heart of the Eucharist is always the transforming relationship. If your education is so effective, the secret is this relationship you enjoy with God that is shared with the students. We know that so celebrating God's justice and love in the Eucharist, we are broken open, transformed to be more just, more loving, more ready to lay down our lives. So Eucharist in itself is so powerful, so relevant a theme that we can reflect a lot on it in the context of being brothers today, being sisters today. We also know that a vibrant spirituality is deeply situated in world realities. Like several other congregations, you too have the privilege of having come into existence for the poor. For us religious, the brokenness of our world is the arena of our mission field and our ministerial responses. Over 1.4 billion people live in extreme poverty. Nearly 1 billion people lack sufficient food and are hungry all the time. Every 3 seconds, a child dies of preventable diseases. Our Mother Earth, our world is in crisis. We are facing global food crisis, energy crisis, climate crisis, a financial crisis, and a moral and spiritual crisis. All of these are integrally related. What is the response demanded from us in this situation? The cries of our world are for a response of solidarity, for healing and reconciliation, to live a mystical and prophetic spirituality that will bring healing in these times. We have to risk moving out of our comfort zones and our tightly held securities. As we often say, our 100-fold. We need to have the prophetic audacity and spiritual courage to see the world through the eyes of God and get involved in our world as Jesus did. In the Gospels, we encounter Jesus, the compassion of God, who models the very life we are called to live today. Jesus went to the ones who suffered, to the least, to the most marginalized, to the sinner and the oppressor. His way of being, his lifestyle was to identify with the poor, the suffering, and the rejected. He took upon their suffering our suffering. He was about bringing everyone the fullness of life. And he called his followers to do the same. That means not only by tending the wounds and healing, but also challenging the systems which create the poor, the oppressed, and all forms of injustices. Experiencing Jesus and his way of life impels us to embrace the woundedness of our world in his spirit. Dear brothers, let each one ask himself, what spirituality and way of life will impassion me and my community to enter into our broken world with a prophetic passion for Jesus? What will give me that passion that your founder had, and so many of those who've gone before you had, and I'm definitely sure many of you have at this time. Authentic spirituality is not an escape from life, rather it takes us to the heart of life, where life is wounded and struggling. In the words of William McNamara, we are challenged to take a long, loving look at the real world and the real God that is revealed to us in Jesus, that is revealed to us in both beauty and suffering today. Our world will see and experience the compassionate heart of God to the extent that we have been touched and transformed to become this compassionate heart of God for others. The deeper we allow ourselves to go in contemplation to the heart of God, the more willing we will be to take risks to which the gospel and the signs of the times call us. With risk, there is always a cost. These are areas I wish you would take time to reflect on. During the past 5 years, what was the greatest risk that I took because of my love for Jesus, and what was the cost? It's good to look back. We surely take risks, but it's good to reflect on them. Now I'm just going to raise a few questions for reflection. What is the new form of LaSallian life to which you want to give birth to? Look at your present lifestyle. Looking at your present lifestyle, you have values, practices, and involvements. What is the loud and clear gospel message that you give to the people around you? Are you satisfied with where you are? Will this gathering lead you to rediscover your founding passion and joy? Will this gathering bring you back to a deeper sense of the purpose of your congregation? Will this gathering make you true border crossers like Jesus, like your founder, and lead you to the new frontiers and ministries and mission? With the leaders and members of your congregation, risk the madness of Jesus, ready to be out of your minds, to let the revolutionary dreams, God's revolutionary dreams for a new earth and a new heaven become a reality in and through you. In and through you, brothers of Jesus. What a beautiful title. Will your passion for Jesus kindle anew your inner fire to help our Mother Earth, Mother Church, become a prophetic and transforming presence in our world today? Sometimes in my wicked thoughts I say, priests and cardinals and bishops have tried their best, it didn't work. Maybe it is time for brothers and sisters to build up the church, you know. So will you let your passion for Jesus envelop the big issues like climate change, poverty, injustice, and suffering that confront our world at this time? I leave you with these difficult but necessary questions, which I know you are asking yourself time and again. You will need spiritual courage and prophetic audacity to enter into these questions and to follow the lead of the Spirit and risk new directions. Whatever I have read of your documents, that gives me tremendous hope that you as a congregation address these issues with seriousness. It's a joy for me as your sister to see that. Perhaps it's a good idea to ask the Holy Spirit to make this conference a terrible crisis. You know why I say that? Because crisis is the turning point. And I hope this conference will be a crisis for the Christian brothers. And then things will move in directions you never dreamed of. May this conference make you divinely restless until God's dreams for you and for your province are accomplished in and through you. By the way, I said restless, but divinely restless. So I don't take responsibility for any other restlessness. You cannot remain where you are because you are men of the Spirit. Men on the move in God's ever-new creation and transformation of our world. You are called anew to a radical, in-depth transformation and not just a surface adjustment of lifestyle and ministries. So something deep is happening. That is why Brother Alvaro or the leadership team or so many of you are feeling this restlessness. There is something God is pushing you to. May you reach there. As we conclude, Roy Lessin's beautiful poem may be a great help. It just says, just think. This is the poem. You are here not by chance, but by God's choosing. His hands formed you and made you the person you are. He compares you to no one else. You are one of the kind. You lack nothing that His grace can't give you. He has allowed you to be here at this time in history to fulfill His special purpose for this generation. I think it's beautiful to reflect on that. Brothers, our world, this generation needs you. We need to take a stand seriously in living our call to discipleship personally and communally. And this ought to come from our heart, from our passion. The power of one is the power to do something. So neither age nor numbers, that's not our problem. It's discovering the power of the one, each brother here. Lynn Twist is so very correct when she says, you don't have to play a big role or a small role. You just have to play your role. The one, each one saying, I need to play my role. Each one of us needs to recognize the passion in ourselves and ask ourselves, what stand am I going to take in the name of Jesus and his mission to be deeply spiritual person, a mystic and a prophet of communion, community and mission in this congregation at this time for the transformation of our world. What passion do I recognize in myself? What passion do I want to see in my community, in my congregation? In each of you, if each of you plays your role with passionate commitment, what will the congregation look like? That may be an interesting imaginative exercise. If all become on fire for mission, on fire for Jesus, with a divine sense, what will your congregation look like? How ready and willing are you to play your role? This conference has tremendous potential for radical transformation if we left the Spirit in. And I can really feel the Spirit is in. May we take her in. I would like to conclude with a very powerful verse of Dorothy Day. It's a beautiful quote. I quote, the greatest challenge of the day is how to bring about a revolution of the heart. A revolution which has to start with each one of us. When we begin to take the lowest place, to wash the feet of others, to love our brothers and sisters with that burning love, that passion which led to the cross, then we can truly say, now I have begun. Thank you, brothers, for your listening. Thank you.